Get your hands off the team's work, literally. Would be my final piece of advice here. If you find yourself reaching for their keyboard, make them do the work. Make them do the work. It is not about you, Scrum Master. And I have a graduate of one of my advanced programs kind of reeled me in with something she was starting to say to me. She's like, "Oh no, Angela, I go ahead and do it for him." She hooked me because I started thinking of all the advice I was going to give her. She goes, "And I intentionally screw it up." She said that if they force her as the scrum master to be the scribe, she just won't, types away in a manner of how it came through her filter. And she's neutral. So, and then they'll get to working and go, "What the heck does that say? What is that supposed to mean? Oh, you want it to make sense to you? Well, then maybe you should jot it down next time." I told her that I considered her evil and I liked it. So, whatever gets you to get them to get that message. You've probably figured out I'm a bit of a tough love coach. So, I have no problem letting them know my hands are going nowhere near that keyboard, right? I may encourage somebody who had a good idea to take the note for themselves, or I may call on the person who spoke to do it. Same thing with your product owner. You're not doing that for them either. And you may want to ask them, "Hey, are you capturing this for yourself or did you want somebody else to throw it on the backlog?" Because anybody can add to the product backlog. Only the product owner inspects and adapts it, ordering it as a result of conversations, or he or she could even delete something from the product backlog. So when you hear about things like burn down charts, those are not your responsibility as the scrum master. A sprint burn down is an optional way developers could choose to represent their sprint backlog. So they don't get off the hook. If they choose to produce a sprint burn down as an optional way to show where they're at on the sprint goal, it is their responsibility to update that. The minimum would be daily. So you can even facilitate or have a conversation with them about what their agreement will be with each other. "Hey, do y'all want to get this updated 15 minutes before the daily scrum? Do you like that for your team working agreement? Or do you want to update your stuff before you log off every day? What's your agreement going to be with each other?" Then you don't do it for them. You don't fall into the trap of being their secretary. You hold them accountable to what they chose as their agreement. So you don't produce burn down charts. Likewise, you don't do that for the product owner either. I get people who are confused between a sprint burn down and a release burn down. So I always fall back on the language: sprint burn down, sprint backlog, right? It's an optional way for sprint backlog. So that's the developer's lane. When you're talking about a release burn down, think product, releasing product. Well, that's the product owner's lane. And the guide is really clear that the product owner gets to create a forecast. So we don't prescribe how the product owner does that in the Scrum guide. He or she could use a release burn down, sure, but they could do a burn up. They could do a cumulative flow diagram if they wanted to. It's their choice. So you don't do that for them. You're not the product owner secretary either, but you can ask all those questions about how they want to show the stakeholders a forecast. Heck, you can even ask the stakeholders or facilitate that conversation between the product owner and the stakeholders about what would be a meaningful way for the stakeholders to get the information. And then the product owner can craft that forecast accordingly. But you don't become their secretary. So the majority of your job as a scrum master is going to happen outside the events. All this people stuff, all these conversations, all this good question asking and facilitating. That's why you heard me say earlier, you got to be a people geek. You not only got to be a people geek, you got to want this job, because there are people who say, I don't really like all that people stuff. I don't really want to get involved when there's a conflict, or I don't want to facilitate. Awesome. Then don't. but don't call it Scrum Mastery. Let's have you do something else. Let's have you use your talents and your abilities to do something else, because we all have choices. And this is just a choice. So I started by saying I made my choice a long time ago. And sometimes when people meet somebody like me who's enthusiastic about their choice, they feel like I'm judging, and I'm not. I honestly respect people for their choices, but I am also respectful of what is Scrum and what is not Scrum. So if you want to do project management, be happy and do project management. Woohoo. You want to go do extreme programming? Yes, go do it. You want to do Scrum? Go do it. But these are just choices. And one of the things that I've done to help people be amazing Scrum Masters is I jotted down a lot of tips from all the years I've worked this way in a book called The Scrum Master Files. The reason our team affectionately refers to our case studies as the Scrum Master Files is we have completely anonymized them. No names were used, no non-disclosures were violated, and even no personal pronouns, so that you're thrown right into the case study as if you were the Scrum Master. And there are 6 of those for you to work through to teach you that critical thinking and to teach you what we may or may not have missed in the scenario as the Scrum Master. So if you want to learn more about that, you can check it out. I self-publish on Amazon. And while we still have these cool shirts, and they do say, get your hands off the team's work on the back of them. If you get the book and we validate the purchase, you post something on social media that says, here's what I learned after reading this book. Or you just take a selfie of you reading it and post it. We send you a free t-shirt. So you've got that to look forward to while we've got them.